All right, everyone. So thanks again for joining us for our guest speakers series. Today, we're honored to have Colin Macrae joining us. He's been a longtime friend of the MDM program, industry friend and connection from his EA days, and most recently, his connection through the SFU Venture Connection. He's been acting as the mentor in residence, specifically with our MDM-related entrepreneurial startups and those who are entrepreneurially minded. We are going to cover a few things today internally as far as what the process is to go through. If you're thinking of pursuing the entrepreneurial pathway, you have different options and even coaching and tips you can engage with along the way. I think what I'm going to do is let Colin say a few words, and then I'll jump back in with some logistical items. But Colin, why don't you just do a quick intro, and then I will take the mic back for a second because I want to address everyone as to the internal process, and then we'll go through your deck, if that's okay.
Sure. Actually, you know what, Dennis? I mean, a lot of that's just embedded in my presentation in terms of my career, other than like, I'm super psyched to be here with everybody. You know, we're into like the second year of having an embedded mentor in the MDM program with SFU Venture Connection, which is the early stage entrepreneurship incubator for early stage companies. So yeah, it's really cool this year. This past year was kind of like a year of like figuring it out. And so this time we come with a lot clearer direction about, you know, what can be the entrepreneurial path for you as you complete the program.
Awesome. All right, so I'm just going to take the invisible mic back for a second. So everyone that's on the call and for the purpose of this video, there's a few additions to this talk. So I'm also joined by Jason and Mohit here, and there's good reason for this too. So Mohit being C14, having just went through this process himself from doing the pitch project for term 3 as part of projects 3 to doing a venture internship from the September through December term, the term that we're currently in, and beyond. He's sort of living it. Jason Elliott himself, both when he was an MDM student, went the pitch project route, also did the venture internship, and then said, I'm done with entrepreneurship, and he came back to academia. Good for all of us. And this is all to say that the entrepreneurial path within the MDM program, there is a formal step to go through as far as if you're thinking about doing a pitch project in term 3. This is an opportunity that will be presented to you during term 2. We do a Dragon's Den-like presentation day where you're going to pitch to an external panel, of which Colin was a panelist on, I think, for the last maybe 1 or 2 that we ran. It's been a rotating cast of very intimidating people to grill you on your business ideas. Mohit lived that experience, actually. But leading up to it, there's a few steps. You obviously need to find your co-founders, find the problem that you're looking to solve and where it may fit into the greater landscape of entrepreneurship. It can be commercial in nature. It can be altruistic. It's not necessarily about building a scalable venture, but BB Book happens to be one. So Jason and I will walk through the dates, deadlines, as far as what it means to do the pitch project for term 3. That's typically delivered in the second term, right, Jason? That's when we're usually doing these things. And there are pros and cons to going the entrepreneurial route. And you know, Mohit's living it right now. He's got his company now funded, which is awesome. It's a connection that also came through the showcase, which I'm also happy about. So lots of degrees of connection here. And then Dave Fracchia is also on the call. He's very involved in mentoring all the interns, not just the traditional interns, but our venture interns as well. So there's a whole support network around this. We keep iterating on that process, and glad all of you are on this call right now. Jason, I know you're teaching tonight. Do you have anything to add to this? Do you want to scare them away, say it's a good thing, or, you know?
Never scare them. I will say the venture path is super fun, super entertaining, and will really let you know whether you want to be an entrepreneur or not.
All right, thanks for that ringing endorsement, Jason. And now, Mohit, I want to get you to say a few things before we get into Colin's actual thing. So you've just lived it. What's your advice as far as finding co-founders, coming up with an idea? What do you got?
In terms of coming up with an idea, I always, like all of us, and I would say for Terence and Meg over here as well, for all of us, it was something, you know, you need to find a problem and solve the solution instead of making something cool, because something cool will automatically comes out of it. That's something which which all 4 of us, and at least 8 of us if Gansham is also here. So every one of us, C14, believed in that. Whosoever did the entrepreneurship or venture route, that you need to have something useful or have a solution out of it for the first in the first place. Secondly, in terms of living it wise, I think Dave knows it. Dave lives with me 24/7. The startup thing. He has been with me, and even John. He's not here, but we have attended meetings at 11 p.m. Sometimes going up till 1 a.m. and everyone hates me for that. But what can I say? We had gone through those paths, and wherein we were talking about in term sheets, we were talking about legal advice, we were talking about all those things. And the worst part of it is always reading those 25 to 30 page documents and trying to understand what it actually means, even though you don't know anything about it. And that's how you learn. So it's a roller coaster ride, a fun ride, I would say. You learn 10,000 new things in the smallest amount of time. And that's the main thing you learned at, like, for me, that's one of the most important thing I learned at MDM. In the smallest time, you learn the most amazing, and the real world experience is you actually get is from this pitch projects and the venture internship which I did. And I think Terence would agree with me on 100% with this case. He's available, but yeah, he would agree with me on this case. That is what actually is.
Buy-in is super important, and again, identifying a problem for sure, but the teammates and the shared sort of passion to move forward with it, you kind of need to come together around that. Again, speaking about how we're trying to iterate on things, Colin's relationship to the MDM program is actually beginning even earlier. So in this sense, we're going to have Colin Macrae address UC15s as to what his role is within SFU's Venture Connection, but also a bit about his own background. He's brought in some additional value. Well, he always does. I mean, it's Colin Macrae here, so I'm going to tip my cap to him. But he gave us a nice life coaching workshop last year, which still resonates with me. I'm like, I think I'm doing what I like to do, so it reaffirmed that for me. But anyway, so let's hear from Colin, and we'll have some time for Q&A at the end. Mohit, thank you. Jason, thank you. Dave Fracchia, thank you. And John Festinger, wherever you are, thank you. And everyone else is thinking about entrepreneurship, thank you. But Colin, thank you. Your turn.
Thank you, Dennis. And thank you, everybody. Thanks for making the time, especially at the end of the day, to be with us. And yeah, as Dennis mentioned, a little bit of like my background, just as a career, relative to working in the digital space. Some offerings just in terms of some learnings and some things that I'm thinking about now in my career that might provide a little bit of value to you, and then more particularly talk about the SFU Venture Connection entrepreneurship program, how that's gone over the last couple of years, the folks that I'm working with, and just to, again, from the earliest stages, for you to understand what that entrepreneurship path might look like for you as you work through the program. But a little bit about me. I'm a career marketing communications person. I've worked both like from an agency side as well as in-house with companies. The most significant tranche of my career was 14 years at Electronic Arts. So that's working in a marketing and communications leadership role on games that I hope you play, like FIFA and NHL and Plants vs. Zombies and Need for Speed and those sorts of folks. But a big part of my role was always in leading teams and being a people manager, and that really became the passionate part for my career. And so I've made a later stage transformation into the leadership and coaching space. I started my coaching training as a leadership coach a couple of years ago, even still while I was at EA. And I left EA in 2019. And then just this year, actually just 8 weeks ago, launched a new company called Fluency Leadership. So the ironic thing is that, like, as we're talking about entrepreneurship, I'm doing the same thing myself. I've done a lot of the things that Mohit has been doing. I have been doing the same things, reading the same 25-page documents and figuring them out. So it's been cool from that perspective. But yeah, long time involved with the MDM program back to its founding days, many, many years ago with the initial cohort, and excited to have that continue to be that. So my career in digital media and working in the interactive space was phenomenal. It continues today in terms of working with clients in that space, but just in a different capacity. I got to do some really cool stuff, you know, and I got to do all of that stuff from here in Vancouver. I got to be part of the team. I started working on the FIFA franchise in 2010. That grew it from, you know, a pretty healthy sized business to now being the world's biggest video game franchise, which is made here in Vancouver. It was born here in Vancouver, which is like phenomenal when you think about it. You know, a business that generates the revenues that are bigger than the GDP of like a lot of countries in the world. It really is a phenomenon. And that opportunity really gave me the chance to work on some stuff that was very emergent, like social media marketing, content marketing back in 2010, 2011 was just really starting. And we got on the early sort of edge of the wave on that, as well as like, you know, things that you observe today in terms of community around video games, influencer marketing, influencer programs, got the chance to do that. And to have the opportunity, you know, to be here in Vancouver, you know, in British Columbia, my home province, and do stuff at a full global scale, you know, it was just a huge opportunity. And so what's exciting, I mean, you guys are at the point at which you've chosen this program, and these are a couple of things that I think, you know, are really cool about the space in which you're in, and that are tenets you can carry forward. First is like digital media is like this undefined future, and that's what makes it so exciting, you know, and the applications. And even if you think about, you know, say, Dennis, for you to reflect back on like the kind of student projects that are being done now versus like what they used to be, like they're so much more expansive, they're so much more diverse. And that's really cool because the landscape of what is digital media and the kind of things that you're working on is changing all the time. I'm big on design-based thinking. As Dennis mentioned, a book and program called Designing Your Life, and bringing design-based principles into how you plan your life and your career is something that I'm really passionate about. And really, if you look at the literature and you look at the pervasive thought leadership around this, design-based thinking is like the driver of innovation today. And you're going to get so much of that, and are getting so much of that within the program. Even more so, like we live in a world in which multidisciplinary thinking and skills are really superpowers. You know, the age of specialization has left us, and the age of generalization is coming upon us. And that is one of the places in which the digital media program that you guys are part of has always been really, really strong in terms of touching so many different areas and getting fluency in lots of different languages of digital media. That's going to serve you so well. It's also a team-based program. Team play is the only way. I know that from my experience working at EA and video games, obviously. But with all those things, creativity is still the soul of the industry. Like great ideas, you know, are the thing that drive things. And just always having that hopeful opportunity that, you know, for those of you that have come to Vancouver, or Vancouver is your home, to know that some of the best work in the world does and has happened here. I think is a great inspiration, and that one we sometimes overlook about the quality of the work and the amount of innovation that happens here in Vancouver. I'm not really sure where this fits in, but like, you know, I think last year Dennis was like, can you just talk about some like interesting things that you're thinking about? And so these are things that I think about, and I think about these things through the lens of leadership. I think about these through the lens of having a higher level of impact and performance in your work. These are the kinds of conversations that I'm having with the people that I coach and the teams that we work with. One is to think less about getting answers and more about questions. You know, using a curiosity-based mindset, and there's, again, a lot of literature around this, and asking questions about the world that you see and the people that you work with, and asking those questions from a place of pure curiosity rather than just trying to get the answer, is something that'll serve you so well, and just a massively adaptive tool for now. Other than this presentation where I'm doing all of the talking, think about a world in which we're talking less and we're listening more. You know, the natural guide of one mouth and two ears is the best measure that we've ever had. And particularly in a program where participation matters, you know, sometimes your participation can come through just being a more active listener. And that's one of the things that I've really learned in my career is I really wish I was a better listener earlier in my career. We live in this very uncertain world where no one can pay the price of perfection. We live in a world that is changing so rapidly that prototyping and getting getting to failure faster through more prototyping is the model that we're going to go forward with in this world. So as you think about the program, as you think about business ideas, as you think about, ventures that you might consider pursuing in the future, think about prototyping. How quickly can I get to an idea and form it, and then just keep going, as opposed to it's got to be perfect coming right out of the shrink wrap. It's a busy time for you. It's a very busy time. Volume and just the sheer amount of work that you're going to go through may be unprecedented in your lives. I would think less about the volume of work that I'm doing and how busy I am. I would think about how purposeful I'm being and how much more time I am creating by being purposeful in how I work and how I interact with my colleagues, how I apportion my time as really important things. So always think about a world of like less and more. Are sort of the things that I just offer to you, and I'm happy to take some questions about this as we finish. I also read an enormous amount of books, and so if you're ever looking for a book recommendation, I can be your hookup. And so I just offer these 6 as ones that are pervasive ones, some of them newer and some of them from previous years that have served me well and I believe serve others well. Essentialism by Greg McKeown, which is a great book about how you live a more essentialist, minimalist life and how you focus on what matters and how you're getting really good at focusing on what matters most to you, is a fantastic framework, and he's got an awesome podcast. You're going to be working in teams, already. And so, what we believe to be the more definitive book and program around that is Patrick Lencioni's 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. Talks about like what makes a great team. It's a fantastic read, and there's tons of content you can consume about that. Radical Candor by Kim Scott. Like, how do people talk to one another? How do they work together? Culture is defined by relationships, whether it be in a team or within a company or within a cohort. And the easiest way to measure that is how do we talk to one another? And Kim Scott's book, Radical Candor, is an absolutely phenomenal framework by how you work in a way that you challenge directly and you have direct conversations with the people that you're working with, and you care deeply for them and respect them as people. And again, great YouTube talks and TED Talks. A book I discovered last year is called Range by David Epstein. And David Epstein is a great inspiration for me and maybe for some of you, because he's the one that believes that the generalists are going to take over the world. And in this uncertain world, having a range of skills and experiences is better than being a super deep specialist in one area. So it's a great book for that. If you're ever looking for a book about the future of work, Bob Johansen, who's a futurist from the Silicon Valley, his book, The New Leadership Literacies, is amazing. It was written 4 years ago, and that book is becoming more true every year. I guess that's why Bob is like one of the leading futurists in the world, because he's predicted everything that's going on in the work world today in that book. It's absolutely fascinating. And then Designing Your Life. Bill Burnett and Dave Evans, who lead the design program at Stanford University, several years ago brought design-based thinking to how you plan out a more fulfilling, purposeful career and life. And that really has been a big sort of inspiration for my career, and a great sidekick as you think about the next chapters of your career, especially at this time. So let's talk a little bit about the Center for Digital Media and the relationship with Venture Connection. So yeah, as Dennis mentioned, this is the second year of me operating as the embedded mentor with the Center for Digital Media. I was involved and sort of rode shotgun with Dave over the summer in terms of providing mentorship to the summer project term teams, which was really, really good. And that has continued through this term as well. So because of the relationship between CDM and SFU, the goal of my role and the partnership is to provide kind of a clear kind of laneway from going from the entrepreneurship opportunities that can spring up from the program into a fully supported Innovation and Entrepreneurship Program through SFU. And the Venture Connection program is designed for early stage companies that are sort of moving from team to company, if that makes sense. Like really going from like an idea, early stages of the innovation, still trying to figure out business model, revenue, long-term plan, all that sort of stuff, and support it through a slate of mentors, learning, resources. In the past, it's also included like physical office space, which unfortunately is not available right now. And it really does then create a broader network for you to connect with other people who are in the same boat, who are also at that early stage of entrepreneurship as well. And, you know, Venture Connection clients would tell you that they are, you know, always finding cool ways to get more value and add value within the other programs and within the other entrepreneurs that they're working with. So Immersio, who some of you might have some familiarity with, who are building an ancient language learning app that is based on conversation. They were from cohort 13, correct, Dennis? Get my numbers right. And so they did a venture internship, and then we admitted them into the Venture Connection program in January, and they are continuing their venture. And then I did a lot of work over the summer with GigaPenguin, formerly Team Vibe, and they're currently working on, you know, I'm meeting with them on a regular basis and planning on their review and intake into the Venture Connection program for early next year.
And you're chatting with the BB book teams as well.
And probably following a similar path. Yeah, I have a conversation with Mohit and the BB book team as well. And just to close, and maybe we can have just more of a conversation and answer questions. This is how you can find me. So feel free to hit me up on anything you've heard today. If you would prefer to ask questions that way, find me on LinkedIn. And and again, to know that throughout the course of the program, we'll have multiple points of connection, either through other presentations, but also into review days and demo days, and then into those that pursue the summer projects as working as teams. My goal is to be there with you every step of the way, working in partnership with the faculty and staff, so that if the entrepreneurship path is one that you want to choose, that you feel as supported and guided to the best of our ability.
Yeah, thanks, Colin. So I'm going to jump in with some leading questions because I kind of want everyone to know some of these things. So they don't just have to be fully enrolled as a company to engage with you, right? So these are students that can book time with you to bounce the idea of the pitch that they're thinking of putting together before we get to our pitch day. So when they're coming together with concept. So this is to say that for the C15s on the call, you will be able to engage with Colin even leading up to the pitch day, which Jason and I will walk through the deck about dates, deadlines, what's required. But as you're coming up with those ideas and the core team, you may benefit from having, not to say an outsider perspective, but someone outside of the MDM, but still internal to the MDM, to act as another resource for helping you better position what you're going to go for. So that was kind of a hope, was to have an earlier engagement with Colin through this process. So I'm hoping C15s, those of you that might be thinking about doing a pitch, as you start thinking who you might be working with or what problem you might be looking at solving, you should definitely be connecting with Colin.
Yeah, and Dennis, we did last term too, is I can set up some dedicated office hours that are just available for people to, we'll hang out on my Zoom and have a conversation about, what's, where you're at, and just, ask some questions relative to helping, get you sharper on the concept and the purpose of bringing it forward.
Cool. Any questions on the call? Because I know some of you are thinking about going this route, so you don't have to be shy.
Well, I guess I'd be curious too, Mohit, being, or Terrence, you're here too. I mean, relative to sort of where you're at in the journey, being a couple months out and sort of now, pursuing the ventures, you know, what's it been like, but also, you know, what are the things you would want this cohort to know now that you didn't know then?
Yeah, that's a good question.
It's for me or for Terence? Where is Terence? Did he leave?
Both.
Okay.
No, he's kind of lurking, I think.
You're on camera, Mohit. Questions to you.
Yeah, you get to go first.
Yeah, so in terms of what we are currently up to, we were just requesting interviews from C15. So that's one thing. We did our first user test with C15, and we are aiming to get some interview results from them. We are currently in chat with John Festinger and Dave to test it and to test our product in another university for another course as well, and to see where we actually could land up being. So it's just like what Colin said and I mentioned, actually, it's a last, like that slide was one of the most important slide, wherein, you know, you pivot more and you work more, you iterate more and you prototype more, then you come up with what you actually want to make. And that's what exactly we are at, which stage we are. We are practically adding and testing one feature at a time, or prototyping 10 things at a time to see what can actually be the best part of it. It's not about making one big thing and then launching it. That's never going to work. And that's what we currently are. And I think that's in terms of learning wise, or in terms of telling it to C15, this is what I'm going to would learn. That design thinking and iterative thinking is something which is very important. Instead of building one major thing, build small, think small, and then add things to it and make it, and see what is the exact market you're targeting, because you will never know what your customers are.
So I'm gonna add on to that question. So knowing that, you know, what you went through in the MDM, how did you find your co-founders and actually present the ideas that you were wanting to pitch as a company? Like, put yourself back in C14 early days shoes, like before you knew who your co-founders were going to be, and then having that, how did you find each other, and how would you encourage
I knew one person for sure, Kyle. He's going to be my co-founder, and I still say him wherever he goes, I'm going to follow him. And that's for sure. I worked with him on one project, and I knew at that moment of time that, like, you know, this person has some great ideas to work with, and a pretty hardworking person. And Kyle would say the same thing for all of us. In terms of Selena and Ruby, my other two co-founders, that is like studying together. We did foundation of digital media together and improv together. Those classes brought us all together into a one major family thing, and that's how we actually started talking. I feel sorry about for C15s that they lack that capability, but Selena and I used to live on the same floor, so, you know, we used to, like, while going up, we would chat about things, and that's how I came to know about them. And once we were looking for ideas, we came to know that Selena and Ruby are actually making something similar. So we went on to them and talked to them and tried to merge all those ideas into one. And that's how we actually became 4 people instead of 2. Earlier it was just Kyle and me, and then Ruby and Selena were doing the same thing.
Well, it looks like we have a question from Ulysses. So you mentioned about the age of generalization replacing specialization, which is somewhat of a new concept. So this looks like it's a question for Colin. Like to hear more about that and the book recommendation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so the book Range by Dave Epstein, who's a great author and journalist, is a great place to sort of look at. And I believe he's got, like, you know, TED Talks or similar stuff that's out there. You know, and the core insight is the fact that, you know, in the pursuit of specialization, like Malcolm Gladwell, like, sort of came up with the phrase of the 10,000 hours, right? So if I'm going to be a really good designer, if I'm going to be a really good programmer, I got to do my 10,000 hours and stuff. The challenge is within that, in the age of, you know, what was previously rewarded in work was the age of specialization. Is that you become so immune to your self-awareness. You become so immune to the fundamental things that actually will make you successful in the future, like problem solving, like relationships, like those sorts of things. And so if you are a generalist, someone who has like a diverse portfolio of interests and passions and work experiences, what that builds you is the resiliency and the ability to adapt and the ability to work relationally, the ability to understand people, the ability to work in teams, which, like, are the more valuable skills going forward. This year has made those skills, infinitely more important in a distributed remote work world where uncertainty is like, lurking around every single corner. And so really it is like, it's about the self-awareness, it's about the resiliency, and it's the ability to problem solve that specialization kind of filters that out, and generalization and having, diverse experiences. And part of it is like a little bit of a, I don't know, like a cleansing for the soul too, which is to say I've done a bunch of different stuff and I haven't really found my thing yet. And maybe this program is, if that is you, or I'm not really sure if this experience is going to be the one that defines my career or whatever the case is, it's like, that's okay, because we're living in a space of generalization where you're going to have, a range of different experiences and failures in the course of your career. Like that's the shape of the world that we have today. And so it's just a good framework around that, and just to really understand like why those things are important.
Actually, and taking that to mind for yourself, like what triggered your exit from EA with, what was the inspiration? What made you scratch your entrepreneurial itch and take that leap into both mentoring, but also starting your own startup yourself?
I was a bit drunk, seriously. No, it's, I think like a truth of your career will always be, how much am I learning, right? How much am I learning every single day, as much as possible? And by no means like had my learning ended at, EA by any stretch, but I wanted to learn other things. I wanted to learn, I wanted to work in places in which like, coaching people and working on leadership development and working with different organizations, was like, was uncomfortable. Like I wanted to go into that space. And so, when you feel like you're not learning, it's arguably the biggest demotivator, behind the work that you're doing, and if the experiences become too contained, too predictable, then you become contained and you become predictable. And that's kind of not working in service of anybody. So, so that was it. And also a desire to follow an entrepreneurship path, as well, in this stage of my career. And, I've done a lot of study around sort of adult learning stages and why we do certain things at different times. And I realized that like, I sort of lined up with this sort of like chapter 5 of adult learning, which is like, you're more interested in the things that you don't know than the things that you do know. And, hopefully earn the opportunity to be able to, make that my profession.
Hey, Colin, can I ask a question?
Yeah, please, Dave.
We're talking about generalization versus specialization. And of course, we all know that with sometimes a large organization, specialization is still the key. Would you say that when it comes to generalization, it's certainly more important for when you want to start your own venture or join a venture, but then when it comes to kind of traditional industry, it still is very specialization focused?
That's a great question. I think the entrepreneurship path opens up more of the opportunities to get fluent in more things quicker, at a certain level, like say for Mohit or Terrence. I mean, it's like, have you ever done a financial plan? No. Did you ever think you would do one? No. Am I doing it now? Yeah, I am. Do I understand the bones of like, equity agreements and all these other things, so you do get that experience for sure. But I think even if you are, again, and following the path of, yes, you take a certain role with a certain company and there's an element of specialization in it, it's more, I think, Dave, to have the self-awareness to say, okay, but what else? Like, what else am I doing? Where am I challenging my learning? Where am I stretching myself? Where am I learning to like understand other things rather than just like the thing in my space? So it's like, it's never a bad thing to have superpowers. Like it's good to have a superpower or superpowers that, like, hey, these are really my strengths. These are the things that I have a pretty good sense that I'm good at. That's fine. But I'm not going to do that at the expense of having other experiences and having more things that I have, some fluency and some experience in, because that's going to help me have a higher level of awareness as I move through the through my career and all the different chapters of it.
I think the danger is if you don't have any superpowers.
Yeah.
Nilesh has a question here. I'm going to just, saw the hand.
Sure. It's kind of related, but I was wondering what a good makeup of team looks like especially from some of the past cohorts for these pitch projects, because I assume you would have to have diverse range of skills. And also, to me, being more on the art and programming side, the financial aspect seems quite scary. So if you could speak on how that kind of process works with regard to pitch projects.
Yeah. That the question of how you build like the right team or the better team, for that, it's such a great question, because there is a tendency for us to want to choose to work with people who are like us, right? Like, talk about the same things, have the same interests, have same background. Like, it's like our biases around those things are amazing. And I guess the aha moment is to say, actually, what we need to do is have like a diversity of experiences, a diversity of opinions, a diversity of backgrounds, a diversity of skills, which in itself comes with some tension, like some harder tension around that, especially as you're trying to figure it out, but to really go and seek that out, and to know that diversity, the different skill sets, the different motivations, like, I think really that's where it comes down to. Like, some people are really driven by process. Some people are really driven by just getting stuff done and being really performance oriented. Some people are driven more by the relational experience and working with people. And sometimes those can come into conflict because our motivations are completely different. So, in my case, with my business partner, we're like radically different. Like, we see the world in the same way, but what motivates us and what motivates us in work is very different. Now, the good part is, because we do leadership and we do coaching and we've done like 400 different assessments on one another, is we know each other really well. So we know like where, I want to have a conversation about something and Catherine just wants to get it done. We realize we're not being like pains in the ass on each other. It's because we have different motivations, right? But the difference is what makes us stronger. So I think that's like diversity of voice, diversity of experience, diversity of motivation, diversity of skill. Those differences will make a stronger team going forward. It will be harder at the start, without a doubt. But if you find yourself agreeing with your teammates too much at the start, it's almost like a weird sort of flag you might want to be concerned about, right? Because then you're going to be just like, a consensus crushing machine. We're like, oh yeah, that's a great idea. Oh, and so is that. It's like, well, because we all had the same idea. It's like, well, what's the different view? Who's reframing this for us? Who's working in a different way? Who's helping us see the stuff that we can't see because we're all carrying the same blind spots, right? And so I think from that perspective, it's as you start to like build relationships with your cohort and think about people, like, it's good to have an intention to say, I want to really be conscious of reaching out to and connecting with people who carry the same values, who have the same desires, but not necessarily the same way of working and not the same motivations.
And I'm going to add in some formal pieces to the MDM experience. So you can never pitch a project with just three of the same. It's like you're all designer, artist, or generally, and this is actually coming from alumni feedback too, from like Angela Hamilton from Coop and her founders. A small core team, what was it? The hipster, hacker, and hustler, I think, were the three sort of mindsets. So the designer, developer, and some biz dev or producer kind of mindset. That's kind of the core. We let a pitch team of a minimum of 3 people can technically form a startup, and we've been encouraged to say that a small group of founders, potentially has a greater success rate. So 3 would be the minimum. 4 is kind of the max too, because we don't want you to be too heavy on. So we have had, and again, in the Mohit's team example, they had 4, right? But I think in Vibe it was 3, right? So there's some, typically it's 4 or 3 people, and it's complementary skill sets. And to Colin's point, you shouldn't find everyone, it's having the same vision and direction you want to move into. It's really great, but having some diversity in your perspectives, especially diversity in skills. And again, on the finance side, not everyone wants to do the biz dev. If Jason was still on the call, he'd be the first to admit, like when he wanted to go the entrepreneurial route, they found out they're great content, they're, you know, developers, they wanted to go that route, but the business side of it, oh my God, that was not for them. I'll just say that. But they're all doing very well. So like Eric Delgado also works at EA now, and you know, it's just there's a lot of benefits to trying it out. But what we're trying to do here is set you up with the best opportunity for success early in the game, and that's why this connection to Colin is established. But all right, Tim had a question for you about your experience within EA on the FIFA side. Colin, yeah.
Ooh, gosh, it's a broad question. I don't know, Tim, if there was a particular, you know, part of it. I mean, geez, where do I start? It's like a big chapter of my life, you know, and like, you know, a whole bunch of experiences like I wouldn't have ever, you know, had doing anything else. You know, I would say, you know, just talking about that, I mean, it's such a huge game, such a complex game, you know, such an international game. You know, the diversity within the team, you know, on FIFA as a case in point, you know, I think at some point we measured it and we had like people from like 23 different birth countries, you know, in Vancouver working on the game. It's an interesting case study relative to the diversity. It was like embedded within the team, you know, and that was like in part driven by the requirement to build like a, you know, international football game from a country that doesn't really know that that well. But it was amazing and just like, and so complex, you know, like Ulysses asking a question about how big are the teams. I mean, I think we used to say that at some point, you know, more than 1,000 people at EA would touch the game before it went to market. You know, if you went across all the different teams, including, you know, third-party teams, data collection, like all that sort of stuff. So like phenomenally you know, complex. So there's Tim.
Yeah. Hey, Colin.
Hey.
Maybe to be a little bit more specific, I heard you mention that you came from a marketing background, right? I think I am. So I'm kind of in the same boat. I just wanted to get more tips from you in sort of, you know, how did you really transition more to the digital side and, you know, having more of an innovation mindset, and, you know, just getting out of that marketing role at EA? Yeah.
So again, I think one of the things we were lucky enough to be able to do was like really be at the forefront of like content marketing, right? So marketing today is driven by content, and continues to be, you know, and then moved into some more emergent areas like community and influencer marketing and those sorts of things that are all part of our experiences as we, you know, drive towards the brands that we choose to follow and engage with. And so, yeah, and like a really big focus on the brand, you know, this is like the story of the brand and what's the insight and what's the purpose. Like we spent a lot of time on that, like on a game by game, you know, year by year basis, but also for the brand, you know, and like in terms of the pillars of like, you know, authenticity, connection to the real world of the sport, you know, those were things that actually didn't exist before, like myself and a couple other colleagues started working on it. Like it wasn't really grounded in that. And so that really helped inform everything. And so, and I would say the last thing that was really sort of like powerful about it was, you know, and if you've done marketing, it's like we can fool ourselves into this world of like customer journeys and like, oh, well, someone will come to our website and then they'll do this and then they'll do this. It's like, they don't do that. Like, it's just a big mess of content, you know? And so you're really just trying to like sell an engaging story, do something that like resonates with people and bring them in, you know, and then particularly like in the context of FIFA, you just make it like the extension of their fandom of the sport, right? Which is like also like our kind of insight that we drove. And it's funny because like a lot of those as insights continue to be, you know, part of what drives the business today, because they're like they were good brand insights and they're like holding the test of time.
Thanks a lot.
Hi, Colin. Thanks a lot for coming out today. This has been fantastic. I've got a question for you. Do you recommend any books or do you have any tips on how to motivate people around you when you're working with like teammates, and I found especially with partners, do you have any techniques to kind of motivate people to continue working?
Yeah. So, I mentioned like Patrick Lencioni and the 5 dysfunctions of a team, right? Which then leads to like the 5 pillars of like what make, so we think about like motivating, like why would we choose to motivate a team, or what's behind that? Ultimately, Tom, it's about like getting the results, right? Like driving the business forward, driving the team forward, achieving what you set out to do. Sometimes but that's at the top of the pyramid. Like you get results after you do all the other work underneath it. And sometimes you say, well, we need to motivate the team, so we just got to focus on the results, focus on getting the work done. It's like, well, you're never going to get to the top of the pyramid in terms of getting results out of your team unless you do the work underneath, right? So it starts, in Lencioni's model with trust, right? Trust and psychological safety. Like if you do not have trust within a team, you will get nothing done. You can't motivate your way out of a lack of trust, right? So you think about trust as being the foundational thing, and what are we doing to build relationship, psychological safety, sense of belonging, sense of place with teams, right? If we don't trust our teammates, we're not going to get anything done. And then you say, and as we're working together, we're going to have conflict. We're going to have disagreement. We're going to come together on things, as we should, because we should be asking hard questions about what we're doing. So we got to figure out how we're going to work through conflict, right? That's the next step that he talks about. And then talks about accountability, right? Like teams that are the most motivated are not motivated by like a hierarchical figure saying, hey, like, here's what we should do, let's go there. They're motivated by their bonds of accountability with one another. Like, I give a shit about you, you give a shit about me, and we are going to hold each other accountable for showing up and doing our work and doing it to the best of our ability. That's actually a far stronger motivator, right? Your motivation to be in support of your teammates is a far bigger motivation that'll ever come from like a given leader, particularly an instructive leader. So those kind of things, like I always think about, like, you want results and you want to motivate a team. I would say, first of all, how are you building trust and building relationship and creating like psychological safety for teams? How are you working through conflict, and how are we doing in terms of holding each other accountable and building on those relational things that we have below us? Those are the ways in which I would think about motivating teams rather than instruction. Yes, you need to have vision. Yes, you need to have like a motivational thing, but it's really all the things under the surface, like the motivation sometimes is the iceberg, right? But you only see 20% of the iceberg above the surface. All the stuff that matters, that holds up the iceberg, is actually the stuff that matters. Things like trust, conflict, and mutual accountability.
Good point, Dave. And I'm also laughing at imagine the Zoom calls with the 1,000-person FIFA studio. Anyway, yeah, that's it's an interesting time we're living in. I think motivating teams in this remote world is sort of a new normal for now. Anyway, I'm hopeful on vaccines in the future. That's not through the screen. I miss that face-to-face, but it's an important question or challenge, keeping your team motivated, moving things forward. Mohit, to your point, like I think the C15s, you have a unique challenge, but I think in your coming to solve these various challenges, there's a lot to be learned. And even entrepreneurially, there's some benefit to the things that you do learn that you could commercialize or bring to your career benefit down the road. So it is that old saying is there's no challenges, only opportunities, or, is it something in that realm? But, I think we're in a very unique time right now. Yeah, but I also know.
I would say that, like, we started our journey on project 2 towards the end. It was totally we had to be like remotely done, and project 3, which was an internship, which was a pitch project, was totally remote. So that's something is the case that we bring out challenges and bring out new things when it comes to working remotely and like that. And I totally agree with Colin in terms of building trust and accountability and disagreements. I think Dave have seen those things while working with our team and while listening to us. We had actually so many disagreements. I can't imagine. I can't tell you, like, we had started meeting at 10 a.m. Then we had disagreements, but we all know that at the end, what we are aiming for is something to build better. So we all agree and, have mutual trust on each other. And we are accountable to these things. Whatever points those Colin said, totally heads on, totally 100% correct in terms of being to motivate the team. That's totally correct.
That's awesome, and I think it's a good anchoring point. There's maybe like one more comment or two. Again, as promised, I kind of have to end the call soon, but Dave just posted a novel, so I'll let him summarize that maybe.
Oh God, I just want to put this so I didn't have to talk. No, there are also the qualities, and I've seen this in Moat's team and Terrence's team. There is this strong determination and fearlessness. When Moat's told by John, I've got someone who is kind of a leading venture capital firm, and they're willing to hear your pitch, and you got to get it ready pretty quick. The team didn't freak out. The team didn't go, oh no. The team went, all right, let's do this. And in fact, both Moet and Terrence's team know that even during their Project 3 course, we brought in people they could pitch to, and they had to pitch to them.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think we worked on the weekend. Dave told us that they want to meet us on Monday or Tuesday, and he told us on Friday, and we were working on like what do we do? We spent entire weekend on making that slide deck. And again, in terms of when John told us, it was an incredible incident. Apparently, on that particular day, CDM building has to be tested for fire alarms. So we were all muting ourselves every few seconds in front of a $1.5 billion VC. It was something incredibly funny. And for a longest period of time, they could not figure out what was happening. It was only at the later stage that they could figure out, oh, someone is in the background testing the fire alarm. So you actually innovate. You actually do all those things when you're working, and totally agreeable. It's like you have to push yourself to the point that, you want to work forward.
All right. I am going to end the call here, but I'm also going to summarize it for everyone else on the call. There's a lot of work involved, but it's, when you're passionate about it, I think, the work feels less worky, for lack of words right now. But the idea here too, if you're thinking about going the entrepreneurial, the pitch project, the venture internship route, know that it's a lot of work. Like that, we're looking for that level of interest, engagement, and risk taking that comes with it, right? So it's not the easy path. There's a lot to be learned from it, and there's a lot of opportunity attached to it. Mohit, you're braving it. Terrence too. Meg, you lived it too. I've been seeing some names on the call here. Colin, supporting resource all the way. Dave, same thing. I mean, and John and everyone around this, like Richard, the former director, he just introduced Mohit's team to the SFU librarian. Like, so there's a lot of value-added connections, resources, people that are here to set you up for success. Or I think you'll find Vancouver in particular is a very open market for these kind of connections, especially while you're students. So explore the entrepreneurial route if you're willing to brave it. Consider it anyway. Leverage the resources around you. Colin, thank you again. Let's do Colin, you and I will figure out how to let them know about office hours or other things for the future.
Yeah.
But all right, well, thanks everyone. I'm gonna drop off, so those of you that have Jason's class can take Jason's class, and those of us who need a glass of water, we'll get a glass of water. All right, see you everyone. Colin, thank you.
Thanks,
everyone
everybody.
On the call, thank you as well. Till next time.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye, Meg.